Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Maura Stephens. I'm a member of System Change, Not Climate Change, and we're really excited to be hosting this webinar with Diane Cohen today. Really, this is the first more practical application type webinar that we've hosted in our last 2 years of this webinar series. And we're very excited about it. It was actually requested by people who attended our webinar on plastics pollution in October. The idea of this webinar was born there. Many of the people said they wanted to learn about how to practically stop purchasing items, especially those made partly or wholly of plastic that would end up in a landfill and then probably in the ocean. I knew of Diane because I have lived in Ithaca for 30 years, and she runs the Finger Lakes reuse centers there, from which I purchased almost everything in my home over the last decade or so. And so I invited her to join us and talk about how her centers have reclaimed tons of architectural, construction, and household items to live a longer life. So we'll be getting to that in a minute, but I want to tell you a little bit about System Change, Not Climate Change. We are a loose eco-socialist network of people from various backgrounds and interests. And we center the earth and people, nature together in our work, believing that capitalism is a dead and dying system that we have to change. And we look for your input and collaboration, and we invite you to join us. Please see our website and our points of unity. And if you find them speaking to you, please get in touch with us. We'll post those links in the chat as well. So you know that recycling is almost a joke in the United States and elsewhere. Only about 8% of plastics are recycled. And in North American facilities, only plastics number 1 and 2 are even able to be recycled. And many of those are mislabeled because there's no regulation on this industry whatsoever. And packaging industry is picking up the slack where fossil fuel is dying, so they have to do something with their product and they're turning it into plastics. So that's why you may have noticed, if you've lived more than 20 years, you may have noticed that the plastic packaging has just multiplied like crazy. So today we'll hear from Diane about how her incredible community building effort that she spearheaded is working to change that on a small scale, and how we might be able to replicate that in our own communities. She founded the nonprofit Finger Lakes Reuse in 2008 with the goals of reducing waste, but also relieving poverty and teaching job skills through reuse activities. And she offers templates for other communities to replicate those ideas. And I know there will be a lot of questions about that today. Before that, Diane helped develop Significant Elements, a nonprofit volunteer-run architectural salvage program. And she's been a longtime volunteer with a regional community development financial institution that creates economic opportunity for the underserved. She also worked with a startup, commercial-free, independent radio station, and a health and human services agency. She's an amazing woman, and I'm so delighted to welcome her today. Please welcome Diane Cohen.
Thanks, Maura. Well, hello, everybody. It's really an honor to be here and to be kicking off this series of workshops with practical solutions and what we can all do to help make positive change. Really honored to be here today, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, because this is a longer form presentation than I usually have the chance to do, and there's still too much. So can people see what I'm presenting right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is a kind of I have a bunch of slides. I'm planning to talk for 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. I'm going to try to go quickly and give you guys kind of an overview of like kind of our current state and some of my thinking, and and leave time for a robust discussion, because I want to meet you where you're at and talk about what steps you might be able to take in your communities depending on where you are. So, and happy to continue the conversation with anyone who's really passionately interested in helping start up something similar to what we're doing here in Ithaca. So what I want to review in my slides, and then we can open it up to whatever discussion you want, is what I think reuse is, why it's an essential and enormously beneficial element of systems change, how reuse relates to the circular economy, environmental justice, social justice, the concept of value, the supply chain, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I want to I'll talk about the background and the programs of Finger Lakes Reuse, including our community reuse center model, a recent deconstruction project we just did, our refurbishing and repair programs, our job training. I'll briefly touch on some of the organizations that have inspired me, and definitely want to leave room to talk about steps to start your own initiatives. And then the final couple of slides talk about who our key supporters were, some of our collaborative partners, and some resources and links that my assumption is we'll be able to share this whole presentation with you afterwards to everybody who's registered. So you'll have this as a resource. What I'm not going to talk about is that a lot of times reuse gets pulled into the recycling world, especially with single-use plastics and going to more reusable. So I'm not going to get into that too much, or the various problems with recycling. And I'm not going to talk too much about the textiles industry and fast fashion. It's a huge deep dive. I did want to mention that in New York State, where we've banned styrofoam, which is something to celebrate, I've noticed that that started January 1st, that a bunch of to-go containers have a number 6 plastic recycling. So I looked up what that is. It's polystyrene. Styrofoam is expanded polystyrene. It's a known carcinogen. Those of you who are in New York State, I think this is something we need to address. And I think it's actually more material than the styrofoam. So, and it's a toxin. So just putting that out there, since I know this group has interest in that. So what do I believe reuse is? So I think of reuse as an action. Sometimes people say reuse with a softer S. I think reuse is like something that, we can really, it's an accessible action. And it includes, when I talk about reuse, it includes maintenance and repair. I think it requires human energy and intellect as opposed to fossil fuels and mechanization. And because of that, it's an excellent training ground for a wide range of marketable skills. And also, I think we're getting some traction with the work that we've been doing as being a key player in the workforce development. And as people are puzzling about where are the workers, workforce engagement is a concept I've been starting to talk about. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Reuse is ideal for durable goods. And I'm hearing on the West Coast, I'm learning there's some movement to talk, instead of about reusable goods, talk about durable goods and kind of distinguish them from recyclables, but durable goods that are made with quality materials, ideally with fair labor practices. But that's a very opaque thing to try to drill down into, but materials that are actually designed for ease of maintenance and repair. Creative reuse, it transforms an object from its original use into something new, but that's included in the reuse definition, and there's a huge opportunity for creativity. It's an act of caring. One of the phenomenons in the Finger Lakes Reuse organization is how caring my coworkers are. I've learned a lot about this kind of caring culture that's emerged in our organization. It's an act of resourcefulness. It's local and hyper local. The more local it is, the more efficient it is, the more effective it is. It's good economics. It's replicable. And I think it's an action we can all take, something that's super accessible. So why? So I'm going to touch on some things lightly, but linking reuse to environmental justice, and the Environmental Protection Agency's definition is environmental justice is the fair treatment, meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And this goal is achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. And I think we all on this in this meeting know that low-income, minority, tribal, and indigenous communities are more likely to be impacted by environmental hazards and more likely to live near contaminated lands. And that's obviously not limited to the US. So where does reuse fall in the environmental justice field? Well, in the waste and materials management, or the end of pipe, certainly reuse has a role there, but also in the the beginning of the consumption chain, extraction, production, and transport. And then the labor that's practiced in all of the above, or in the act of reusing, you get to avoid some of that, the unfair labor practices and just the toxic practices. Reuse just has a profound impact just through avoidance. I had the opportunity to go to a reuse conference in Cincinnati a few years ago, and this fabulous museum there called the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. And they have a display on modern slavery that really has stuck with me. More than 20 million people in the world are currently in slavery. So unfair labor practices and consumption are inextricably linked. So if people want to look more into that, I just wanted to put that in there. And I'm not sure if people are familiar with the concept of the circular economy versus the linear economy. So just a basic overview. The linear economy is, what capitalism supports. It's the take, make, waste line from extraction to the landfill or incinerator. And there's, out of the UK, primarily in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, this concept of the circular economy has been emerging, where there's just a more circular design to how materials are produced. And I like to say that reuse is actually, this is for my own amusement, but it's a cornerstone in the circular economy. It really impacts every single component of the circular economy. Reuse is just a critical activity to help promote and perpetuate circular flow of materials. So, as far as where reuse specifically can help avoid the negative aspects of the linear economy in the extraction sectors, the mining, the logging, the farming, the water and the energy resources that are used in production and consumption, textiles, electronics, PFAs, so many chemicals and leachates, water resources again, energy use, the transportation. And finally, in the waste sector, which is a lot of where reuse tends to get relegated, but because it impacts the whole chain, I really want to highlight it. But obviously, recycling, landfill, and incineration, reuse has a role. This was a grad student at Cornell, actually a Humphrey Fellows. She had her PhD. So I love this slide because even though we may have a fairly responsible and well-lined landfill in our neighborhoods or nearby, a lot of our waste or recycled material goes, in quotes, goes overseas and is not handled properly. And just from leachates to pollutants, it's a huge, huge problem. Here's a photo in Indonesia of a whole community subsisting on, valuable materials that make it to this state. We need to get to them before they get there and have the right systems. And this photo was taken just last week in Ithaca, New York, making our own little landfill out of some houses up in College Town, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. One of the problems with reuse being stuck in the materials management or waste management world is that it's not prioritized because it's not the majority of the volume of what's going to landfill, but I would argue that it is a great majority of the value, not just the economic value, but the environmental value and impacts. And so, I think that's something that it's one of these invisible things that we're missing, but it's a concept that I'm trying to get out there a little bit more. Just a light touch on extraction, just electronics alone. You just look at the minerals and metals that are in our electronics, that are in all of our houses and all of our lives and our automobiles and everything. We're doing a lot of mining to support our kind of thirst for electronic products. This, I gave this in an environmental justice presentation that was focused on the Northeast. So that's what this slide is from. But these are mines that are not active. Just to give a sense of, the mining that goes on in order to kind of satisfy the consumption that we have. And as you might imagine, were those closed up properly? Are they impacting our water supply, et cetera? I mean, there's a lot of questions when you look at kind of the volume of mining that goes on. Production has its problems too, and just a quick focus on textiles, whether it's natural fibers or synthetic fibers, they can be really energy intensive, water intensive, toxic. So for natural fibers, cotton and wool, I know you've heard it, they can have serious environmental impacts, water use, greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm just going to skip through this, but it's here if you want to take a look at it. And nylon is incredibly energy intensive. So, what's the right solution? So now I'm going to move into more positive things because I can't dwell on that for too long. So, what is the reuse sector? And I've been saying, it's really this human focus that is probably one of the greatest most powerful components of this action of reuse. And I really had an epiphany that it's not about the stuff as much as it's about the people. And with the pandemic going on and on, the sense of connection and the loss of connection, I think, is going to have increasing importance. And our reuse centers are playing a role in our communities to provide some of that sense of connection. So what are the components of the reuse sector? In Tompkins County, a county of about 100,000 people, we've got more than 40 businesses and nonprofits that do trade and use materials. So that includes community reuse centers. We have an architectural salvage store. We have thrift stores. We have antique stores, online resellers, which aren't even counted in the brick and mortar 40 that are doing trade in reusable materials. Something we're aspiring to develop is more distribution and processing warehouses. We need a lot more space to do what we're doing. We have workforce development programs, and there's repair programs as well. We're from an economic standpoint, reuse converts a liability waste that has a cost and a huge environmental impact to put everything into a truck. And in Tompkins County, we truck things 40 miles away to the landfill that we work with, a couple of counties away, and we pay $96 a ton to do that. But through our reuse center cash registers, we're selling stuff for $2,000 to $3,000 a ton. So what my question has been to economic development people is, why not set up a structure to get all of this material and keep it here and support jobs? This is just a snapshot of our revenues over time. The blue line is the revenues earned through sales, primarily sales, but some service fees like pickup service or computer refurbishing or computer repair. And then the gold line is the grants and donations, because we are a 501c3, and so we've been able to support a lot of our launch with grants and seed money through that. Currently we're about 70% self-supported. Supporting before COVID, we were up at 80%, and we're still trying to recover from the disruption of COVID and the growth that actually has happened as a result of COVID. You can see when we opened our second reuse center in December of 2015, what happened to our growth, our visibility, and also we were pretty consistent in our fundraising, $350,000 a year, something like that, and then we got some PPP funding, which skews that a little bit for the last couple of years, and both those grants were forgiven, or those loans. We believe deeply in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and particularly with the social movements that have been happening over the last couple of years with George Floyd's murder. I thought I understood DEI, but I have been doing a deeper dive in inclusion and decision-making, and looking to, it's a work in progress, but looking to take our organizational structure at Finger Lakes Reuse and do a more inclusive decision-making process. So that's been a really interesting and rich exploration. And I always would love to talk about that with anyone who's interested in exploring that further. This in the upper left, Adam Grant, I saw this TED Talk and realized that what he's talking about, and it was kind of this get off the couch out of your COVID depression video. I realized that what he's talking about is happening at Reuse every day. And he talks about mastery, mindfulness, and mattering. And this sense of engagement that happens with people who participate in the action of reuse. So I think this is a powerful thing, and I put another link to this at the end of the presentation if you want to look for that video. These women had just organized a lumberyard. I mean, this type of sentiment, it can be found. The reuse centers are places for a lot of hard work, but there's also a lot of gratification at the end of the projects that we do. So what is Finger Lakes Reuse? We're a charitable 501c3 nonprofit social enterprise. The Tompkins County, this wasn't my idea. I often get accused of being the founder. I just got lucky and was asked to take the lead on coordinating this, and I feel incredibly fortunate that I was able to step into this role. So we got some funding money from Tompkins County out of recycling revenues back when commodities market was a little healthier. And we originally incorporated in 2007, and then we opened our first reuse center in November of 2008, and then the second one in December of 2015. So I've been in this reuse sector now for 21 years. I was at Significant Elements, which was a historic Ithaca preservation organizations program from 2001 to 2008. And then moved into the executive director role for Finger Lakes Reuse prior to the launch of our first reuse center. I had an art major and a politics minor, and with that academic background, I went into bartending for 19 years, and 5 of those years overlapped with my nonprofit work. And I always said that bartending was it was my gateway to nonprofit work, but also it was very helpful in becoming an executive director. I knew a lot of people, and it's been really helpful in trying to understand and continue to build community. So when we developed our mission statement for Finger Lakes Reuse, we wanted to attach it to the triple bottom line concept. We wanted to be clear that we were going to take a strong business approach to what we were doing, but also a just approach. So to enhance community, economy, and environment through reuse. We also recognized that was a very broad mission statement. So we also developed early on some specific goals to reduce waste, relieve poverty, and teach skills through engaging reuse activities. That's still a huge charge, and I think it's part of the reason for our growth and part of the reason for our strain while we're growing to provide this breadth of services. And probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, our board had a retreat, and the vision statement that came out of that, I was really proud that that's what our board landed on, was for a just, resilient, and waste-free world that values both people and resources. So really, it's been an honor to be part of the development of this community organization. We've tried to tie a lot of our concepts to some of the great global thinking that's going on. And so the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and being able to link environmental justice and human rights to the activities of reuse, that pretty much every sustainable development goal has some sort of link to reuse and reuse activities. So we've been really wanting to highlight that, and we actually got a large grant from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation to pay 5 muralists to enhance our Ithaca Reuse Center with murals that raise awareness about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and linking reuse to human rights and the SDGs. So we got these phenomenal murals out of it that if you ever get the chance to see, and I think that there are some, I think we have something on our webpage that gives a little more detail about this. So like I said, we have 2 reuse centers. They're 6 miles apart. We started with furniture, household goods, and building materials in 2008. Those were the materials that weren't what we thought weren't as well served in our community. We got into computers and electronics in 2010, And then I think in 2015 got into clothing and shoes and books and media. And clothing, shoes, books and media are only sold at one of our locations, but we accept them at both because we're trying to make reuse convenient. When we did our early planning, the two main motivating factors when we're asking people what would motivate you to participate in reuse was it has to be convenient and it has to be affordable. So that's a real basis for what we're doing. For those of you who aren't from New York State, don't know where Tompkins County is, we are not anywhere near New York City. We're in a very rural county with Cornell University. So with the students, we've got 65,000 people in the city of Ithaca and a total of 106,000 people in the county. We're on Cayuga land, part of the Haudenosaunee Nation. Some people may know it as the Iroquois. We're in the Owego River and Susquehanna River watersheds. We're surrounded by these, low density. There's not a big city really anywhere near us. And these are the two green hearts in Tompkins County are our two reuse centers. We just helped Cortland Reuse, an independent nonprofit, get a reuse center open last fall. And we helped a couple of years ago Otsego County open a reuse center, and they're looking to open a second one. I don't think it's open yet, that's why I use purple. But then we've been approached by all these other communities with real interest and would love to continue to talk to them and figure out how to get this supported. A really exciting shift in mindset just in our community is we've won Best Thrift Store a number of times, but we won Best Department Store, and you can see who the finalists were. So this amuses me, but I also think it's an important shift in having us be more accepted as a mainstream, not just like a nice side thing, but a more central part to consumerism. And we're really proud of that. We're really trying to make the shopping experience feel, clean and accessible like a department store would be. What are we selling? Household goods is, which probably average $2 to $3 an item. That is our main bread and butter. And then building, all the other categories have tons more opportunity. And we get more than we can even handle and put on the shelves. So so this is, again, a snapshot of today, but not what the ultimate potential is. So here's just a quick slideshow of our various community reuse centers, shelves, what we sell, building materials, lots of lighting, lots of furniture, a couple of exhausted volunteers doing what we call product testing. We do some basic testing on home electronics. That's our reuse, we call the Reuse Mega Center manager, that's Jess Orkin. That's back processing clothing in the back. This is our overflow of clothing. That's one picture. Here's our book department. We sell lots of media, DVDs. We sell a lot of VHS tapes. We can't keep VCRs in stock. A lot of handling and processing to get these materials done, and really great people, energetic people helping us do the work. Here's another picture of the mountain. And the first person we hired, Louise Henry, who's still our administrative manager, called it supply chain eruption recently. It's been a huge challenge for us, how much stuff is coming in. And we're kind of working on scaling to industrial level, but we're not quite there yet. And then meanwhile, the New Yorker has tapped into, I think their next week's cover or the week after was a Christmas tree made out of Amazon cardboard boxes. The consumerism that's happening now is daunting. The people are spending money on consumables and instead of going to restaurants and traveling. So it's really a little bit overwhelming. And this is the sensation we have in our organization, even though we've grown and did $2 million in sales last year. It's a lot. So I'm going to go quickly through this because this was the last 5 weeks of my life, and I want to just talk about the scale of this project that we just did. Even though I was saying Finger Lakes Reuse does not have the capacity to do this, we deconstructed an enormous house, 4,500 square feet, 100-year-old wooden frame structure, 10-bedroom house. There are 11 houses coming down in what's known as College Town, just off it's the main road into Cornell University. and a developer is developing that. And so through a lot of partnership and community interest and energy, we were able to salvage out of 10 of the houses a lot of materials in partnership with Historic Ithaca and many others. And then we focused on salvaging a whole bunch of, well, here's the houses. I'll just show you. All of these houses, the first 3 on the right, they've all been demolished already. Yeah, those have all been demolished, that north block of Catherine Street. And this is the house that we decided to fully deconstruct. And we flew in an expert, Dave Benning from Bellingham, Washington, to do this work with us in a timeline that could inspire the community. So we actually took this apart structurally in 5 days. We prepped it for 5 days prior to that. And you can see it in the middle between these 2 houses. And what I was saying is we do not have the capacity. Finger Lakes Reuse, everybody said, Diane, you have a deconstruction program. You can do this. And I said, we're getting so much stuff dropped off at our donation areas each day. We don't have any way to absorb this material. But the New York State Department of Transportation, which was downtown in Ithaca on the waterfront, it's in the lower left, I'm sorry, of this picture. And we've rented the 2 warehouse areas that are in red. That got purchased by a developer last spring. The city worked for 15 years to get them out of this waterfront and got them to avoid making it the headquarters for their state troopers and putting a cell tower there. It's right next to the farmers market, and we have an option to renew for another year. So we're there hopefully till the end of 2023. And we were, by signing that lease in December, we were able to absorb that volume of materials that was coming out of these buildings. Oak flooring, kitchens, really beautiful stuff. One house had all fir flooring that was beautiful. And one of the things that came out of it was a partnership with the local labor union. And these guys volunteered for 2 weeks in December before Christmas and pulled up oak flooring for us. Here they are. This is their first day beginning. And this is the flooring they pulled up. That room got filled up to the ceiling with flooring from the rest of the house. And they still left stuff upstairs. Our warehouses, both those spaces are full already. There we are bringing stuff in. Beautiful chestnut boards. Here's a kitchen that we put on the floor, and the next day it was sold. And we had, after the union guys finished pulling up flooring in 5 of the houses, then between Christmas and New Year's, we switched to doing a call to the community for volunteers. And we pulled up more flooring and then bucket brigaded 2 boards at a time for safety, because they all had nails in them. A retired plumber showed up and cut a bunch of copper for us. And we just did this, went into overdrive, harvesting as much material as we could out of these houses. There's our board member on the right, John Lemley, passing to, some of you may have heard that our mayor has resigned, and our acting mayor came and volunteered for 3 hours, Laura Lewis. So we were really proud that she came and joined us that day. We also did tours before the deconstruction started because we knew there was community interest. So there's our board president in the middle talking to, oh my gosh, Diane's, Susan Holland, who's the executive director of Historic Ithaca on the right. And in the background, Cornell professor Felix Heisel, who directs the Circular Construction Lab, is talking to the Cornell Alumni magazine, getting interviewed. But it was a bitter cold day, and we had 10 elected officials show up. Cornell actually covered the whole project. Here's the elected officials looking up at the house we were about to start deconstructing in a couple of days. And here's the house. This is how we started deconstructing it. One highlight is we saved 7 brown bats from the walls. It was the foreman of the union said, we can hear bats. And so I set up a bucket for him and actually found a wildlife rescue place that, when I called the number, said, we're sorry, we're only accepting bats right now. So I was able to drive these bats to this woman who's taking care of, she's a certified bat rescuer. So we had a salvage effort going on in one house. You can see the house in the foreground here, and then the house in the background is being deconstructed at the same time. Here's the deconstruction of the house. They've got the roof off on the 3rd floor, and they're working on cutting panels into the next floor. And meanwhile, the demolition, it was very dramatic. The demolition was happening behind us. This is harvesting the columns from the house next to the one we were deconstructing. Brought the union guys over to help stack the radiators that we slid down the stairs on boards. One of our ingenious volunteers. The developer owns a lot of property and put up the expert we flew in from Bellingham for 5 nights in his in one of his empty apartments. That was helpful. And here he is, Dave Benink, who's got the Building Deconstruction Institute giving a safety meeting that must have been on day 3 or 4 to the union guys at 7 a.m. Couple more photos. We just took it apart in panels and trucked it down to the DOT site just to get out of the way. And now we have to process it all. So that's phase 2. And plus all the stuff we salvaged from all the other houses. There's the whole thing happening. So we got it down to the ground. And here's some of the material that was sitting out and felt like we needed to get some tarps on the stuff we couldn't fit in. So we have that, and now it's gotten snowed on, and we'll start processing it. One of the warehouses is heated. So we'll do a kind of a workforce engagement process where we denail, we have pneumatic denailers, and we'll be processing and using that kind of mindfulness, mattering, and mastery to get some people who may not envision themselves in the trades or doing repair or maintenance or working with tools, maybe get some people excited about that. Not too much on the computer repair and refurbishing, but we are a licensed Microsoft refurbisher, and we are able to refurbish computers. As electronics get smaller, we're looking at how much we should put into that, but we would like to continue to certainly make electronics available, particularly for people who have barriers with the digital divide. We have a job training program. It's kind of a mutual benefit job training program where people help us process all these materials, but learn skills in the meantime. We have a 2-tiered track where you can volunteer at first and then get paid if you have, met a certain number of criteria, like showing up on time and various things like that. A couple of tenets that we kind of adhere to, like having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And I recommend looking up Carol Dweck and this concept, because it's helpful in personal life, professional life. And another concept that I like is the sense of agency that Matthew Crawford wrote about in this book, Shop Classes Soulcraft. I think he was an investment banker and became disillusioned and opened, I believe, a motorcycle repair shop in Southern California. It's a great book talking about this phenomenon of agency that happens all the time in our reuse centers. Here's some graduates from our Reset Tech program. And there's other opportunities for training and mentoring. And here's a creative reuse workshop that we did where I just love the intergenerational exchange of skills. We give a lot of materials away very briefly. Last year, we gave materials to over 300 households. We do it in partnership with human service agencies. They fill out an application on behalf of their clients. And we have this trust-based thing where we just set up a store credit in their client's name, make it really easy on the client. I know there's a lot of interest in repair. Our Ithaca Fixers Collective that we started back in 2013, we started it after like the 7th person emailed me the New York Times article about repair cafes and the New York City Fixers Collective that had started up, and there was one in Washington State, I think. And so we started the Ithaca Fixers Collective. We sent out an email and said, who's interested, who's got skills, who wants to learn? And we were overwhelmed with the response. So we kicked it off, and we've done it every Saturday in our reuse centers until the pandemic hit. That disrupted this program, and the volunteers were all at that, retirement age where they have not wanted to, we haven't quite figured out how to regroup. Plus, we've grown so much over the last 2 years. We're going to put it in a new place, but we have to move the books out of the way. It's a long story, but it's right now it remains on hiatus. But right before we closed down, we had started these kids fix events, and they were incredibly popular. And I just love the intergenerational exchange of knowledge, and hope to do a lot more of this as we continue to grow and use reusable materials and the stuff that we're not able to get to that need repair into this mix with this programming, because it was just a huge success. So hopefully, maybe you guys have heard of Repair Cafés, and they tend to be pop-ups. We did our Fixers Collective out in our reuse center where shoppers who might be difficult to reach, could see, oh, what's going on. So it really kind of organically grew. Repair cafes pop up and they definitely reach a lot of people, but we have a slightly different model. But she's amazing. I had the honor to meet her. She taught me how to fix a hole in my wool sweater. She flew in for a reuse conference. I think maybe that was the Cincinnati conference, actually. It's just an amazing speaker, amazing force. And another model, though, I want to highlight is this Fix-It clinic that's, I think, somewhere in California, but they've figured out a way to do it virtually. So you present your problem with a little video in the Zoom for 5 minutes, and then you may go into a breakout room with someone from Japan or someone from Rhode Island to help walk you through repairing your own item. So I highly recommend looking up this model. It's really exciting, and I think Cambridge might have an upcoming Cambridge, Harvard, I can't remember, has an upcoming event if you look that up. Trying to get public investment in this, I think, is really important, because we are part of the materials management, waste management, and can really help mitigate that. But then there's so much more. And so talking about the return on investment, I think, is important. And I just listed some potential things that you could start putting some numbers to. And, we know how to do this. So my coworker, Scarlett, I love her t-shirt. It's not rocket surgery, visible retail locations, warehouses, repair and maintenance skills. You need equipment. We're starting to get into this industrial. We have a couple of forklifts. We have 4 trucks, but we need a lot more space. And I think it's really key to highlight fair working conditions, because we're not doing this just to make money. We're doing this for the people. And so the workers should be treated fairly during the process. So the next steps, I think, we have an online business plan template called ithacareuse.org. It's a little bit out of date, but it has some strategies in there, like how to engage your community before you open your doors for success. I just want to show you the sources and resources I've included here. And then the many partners who have really helped us get out of the gate and helped us sustain as we've continued this growth. And that's the end of what I have to present.
Wow. Everybody feel free to unmute and give Diane a hand. Boy, you covered so much in there, Diane. I couldn't believe how much you covered. I didn't think you could do it in such a short time, but you sure did. Oh boy, and we have a number of questions that have come up. I'm going to invite, I have a few to start with that have been sent in advance or dropped in the chat already, but after that we can let people perhaps unmute themselves if they'd like to, or continue dropping them in the chat if you'd rather I ask the questions. But let's just keep them to questions, because we only have another 45 minutes or so. We don't need to have statements, but we probably all already know a lot about how bad things are, but we're looking at solutions here. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions about the replication. So we'll leave those till later. There are several that came in in advance, and I'll just take them in order that I got them. From Maggie Farley in Maryland, how many training people do you think it would be a minimum to start a fixers collective? That is, how many people who kind of know what they're doing about repair, I think is what she means, to start a collective and training one another. And then of course the skills grow with other people and then they become the trainers. But
I had the same kind of question before we got started. And so I would be willing to share somewhere. We did a survey, and we put it out very publicly and shared it as broadly as we could. And we said, who out there has skills and who out there is interested in learning? And we thought there would be a great imbalance, that we'd have this little sprinkling of people with skills, a lot of people who were more interested in learning. We actually got an enormous response on people with skills. They're out there. And so we didn't do any training. And we actually, what I've watched, and I participated in most of the Fixers Collective sessions on Saturdays. And for a while we did it on Thursday evenings as well. And I did a lot of those. And what I watched was, it wasn't that someone knew how to fix something, it's that they knew kind of which tools, or we had the tools. Sometimes the tool is the limitation. But the phenomenon that I watched happen over and over was when 3 people triangulate on a problem, we can solve a lot of problems. So we had a very consistent 70%, 70+% success rate in repair. We kept a log. And so I wouldn't worry about that, but I would just try to consider how to invite people in to come help. And it definitely, we had some characters who signed up and would come week after week to be helpful. And sometimes they needed to be managed a little bit, but really the organic nature of it was really great. And we had a retired nurse who kind of took the lead and was there week after week and would pick up some of the other repairers and get them home, people who didn't have a car, who were in poverty. But this one woman, Susie, she was a dishwasher at a nearby restaurant, and she would, Susanna, we would have something that needed to be repaired, like a file cabinet with the thing would be locked or whatever. She would have the thing that we needed in her pocket. She was, oh, I have that. It was, I can't explain. People are amazing, but I think, trust that those skills are somewhere in your community and try to find them. And I'm very in favor of surveys that both educate about what your intent is, but invite people in to participate in the planning of that intent.
And then how do you circulate those surveys? Are they online? How do you get them around?
I think we did we made a Google survey. I'm pretty sure that's what we use. I think I might have done it. I have very minimal skills, but I'd be happy to share that original survey. If people want to follow up with me, Diane at fingerlakesreuse.org, I'm happy to try to share some resources. I think we did it through all channels, right? Through our press release, through listserv partners, and just said, hey, we want to start this thing. What do you think? Come to a meeting. So we definitely believe in the press release.
Oh, that's great. And I was struck when you were talking about the intergenerational thing, Kids Fix, where I would imagine a lot of the training goes from the young toward the old, especially when it comes to electronics. So
Absolutely.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, we're all saying, oh, you don't know how to do that, ask a 10-year-old, ask a 7-year-old. Now they're getting younger and younger. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So from Rich Entlich, in Ithaca, New York, how can corporate, though this is a really big picture question, going from the local to the big picture, how can corporations which thrive on a throwaway / planned obsolescence model be pressured into adopting more sustainable and planet-friendly manufacturing and marketing policies? I think,
I guess, first of all, hi, Rich. Nice to hear from you. I'm glad you're here and would love to catch up sometime. Rich was a key person in our the development of our computer refurbishing program, and volunteered for many years. So, I think that it has to be kind of multi-pronged. What we've tried to do is create a path. We're not we don't take as much of an advocate approach, and we try to focus more on the practical solutions that we can control. And so one of the things is it's that infrastructure. A corporation would be more likely to, instead of putting stuff in the dumpster, which they can afford to throw away everything they want to throw away. But if there's a local ordinance plus a place for this volume to go, there has to be a place. So, when a nearby town offered us all of their 160 fluorescent fixtures from their town hall, and we said no thanks, but because they want to convert to LED. But then we said, well, we used our existing fixtures, bypassed the ballast that's in there, and put an LED. We had an electrician do it. It was very affordable, and the whole light fixture stays there. So they're considering that right now. But I think you're going to have to make it easy for them. We're talking about a deconstruction ordinance right now to force developers to not destroy, that volume of houses and wood and resources that we just lost. I mean, it's really overwhelming what we just experienced. And we got a portion of it, but a small portion, even though it overwhelmed us. But you can have an ordinance in place But if you don't have a place for the stuff to go, it's toothless in that sense. So I think really focusing on the infrastructure and what does that look like, and that's one of the things we're trying to demonstrate. How big is that? It's pretty big, and there's some empty box stores in almost every community right now.
Right,
So
whole malls, yeah,
Mhm.
whole malls that are empty that could be used for that. And unfortunately, colleges that are going under where they have huge facilities that are not being used.
Yep.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of unused space that could be used for good housing and other repurposes. And I was, well, let me continue with the questions that have come in here. Dakota Tangrady, if in Marion County, Oregon, asks, have you looked into donut economics? Circular economics has faced some critiques from folks in the materials management field.
I have not. I've heard of it. I think, yeah, the circular economy also has challenges. It's an ideal for sure, but it makes sense to, design something to be reused, to design a home or a building that instead of, gluing and using adhesives to glue all the layers together, or designing components that have no hope of anything but delaminating and leaching in a landfill somewhere, designing something for the what next, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm not an economics expert. I do believe that for local economies, harvesting materials instead of paying to throw them away has so many multiplying benefits that I think even locally, our kind of more traditional economic thinkers are coming around to the sense of what we're talking about here, because we've been demonstrating something that's growing so much.
Can you tell people what happened to the people who were living in those houses that got demolished?
So it was all student housing. And so, over a period of time, the developer purchased that student housing from the various landlords who owned them. I think it was 3 or 4 different landlords. And they put this together. It's actually there's going to be more that comes down as they build their empire. So the houses had been empty for more than a year.
Okay. So nobody was displaced by that particular.
No, and we knew about it for a year, and I had been protesting that we do not have the capacity. I said, unless we can get that DOT site. But then I still was puzzling around the labor, but then the labor unions got really excited because they're having their own workforce engagement and workforce development challenges and recruitment challenges. So they were super excited to use their training program and bring it to us. And the people that were working were really happy because they had that sense of purpose while they were, pulling up flooring. They knew they were doing it. They were saving something good.
I was trying to keep a list while you were talking about that project and how many collaborators you had. It was, the plumber and the retired, you had everybody in there.
Yeah, I think it was
labor
nearly
group, boarders, a plumber, elected officials, the bat rescuer. Oh my God, the one certified bat rescuer. That was pretty amazing.
It was the highlight of the whole thing, I will say.
I'm sure it was, rescuing those 7 bats. And just extraordinary how that builds community just by the nature of people doing something really important together, and that hopefully those relationships will continue.
Well, with COVID and that's, that lack of connection, people kept showing up. It was 20 degrees, it was 10 degrees, it was 3 degrees, and volunteers came and worked in icy conditions and snowy conditions. We had safety meetings every day. I'm very proud that over the course of 5 weeks, I gave out 2 Band-Aids. It was on the same day, so I must have given a poor safety meeting that morning. But I mean, we handled all of that material with nails in it and didn't have any injuries. And so it was really this huge surge of caring from the community and people really wanting to be connected to something that was worthwhile. The number of people, I think we had 8 volunteers on New Year's Eve. This Sunday, I think it was Sunday after New Year's Day, we had a really good turnout. It was just astounding to see the community respond to this.
Well, clearly I've been in your stores hundreds of times. As I mentioned at the top, I basically, my husband George and I furnished our home with articles that we bought there. We're donors, and we have given things there as well. And I did a one fixer collective. I wanted to get better, but I wasn't in my time frame.
Mm-hmm.
But the community is extraordinary, and that the people who work there are happy working there, and they're happy helping you. And it always felt good going in there. So that's, a real testament to you and your team and the culture. Of course, it's Ithaca, New York, which is generally a pretty lovely place to be anyway, but it could happen anywhere. And doing projects together, there's no better way to build community feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that brings up a question from Paul Flansburgh in Rochester, New York, who is talking about, is there any relationship building with veterans? And he also wants to know what you did with the old nails.
Well, first of all, we haven't started denailing yet, but I think we're going to have to measure how many 5-gallon buckets and what we end. It's an enormous amount of wood that we harvested, and now it's staged and waiting. We're about to. We just got the lease on this warehouse, and then we filled it up partly with our stuff and then with these building materials. As far as veterans, I was just on the phone with a Vietnam veteran he's specialized in wood products and black locust and some really cool things. And I was just talking to him about all this 100-year-old wood. We got 8-inch wide chestnut boards, and he's done a lot of youth education, and he loves kind of connecting nature to STEM issues. And so he's always like the science and the math around what he's teaching is a big deal. So he was talking about looking at the ends of the boards and trying to, try to assess what the core of the size of that tree was. And so I think he's interested. Otherwise, we give discounts to veterans. We give discounts to almost anyone who will sign up to be a super reuser. But we don't have any other formal programming than that at the moment.
So we don't know where the nails are going to end up either. Exactly.
Well, we're going to, we're definitely going to measure them. A lot of the flooring nails, they weren't the cut nails, the ones that are wedged. So I'm going to be very interested in were these floors rehabbed at some point, or trying to understand the history a little bit better. But they seem thin enough that they're going to be bent, and we're probably going to end up scrapping them for the steel. But we'll see. There's actually, in the structural lumber, there's some bigger nails, so maybe we'll set those aside and do what the old farmers do. Straighten them out and use them again.
And Eugene Marner asks how you go about determining the pricing of the materials that you resell, that you process.
That's where I've been pondering, what is value, because it's so subjective. What we do is we've always tried to have our prices 50 to 90% below what you could get it for new. A lot of the stuff we sell, you can't get new, or is better quality than anything you could get new. So that kind of disrupts our rule of thumb formula. And also we're struggling financially. The COVID's been very difficult. We've been growing. We don't have any reserves. It's been a real challenge for us to, keep on keeping on, but we're figuring out our path. And we've got some great community leaders kind of looking at our model and where are we going right now. We've got a great planning committee, but, what we've designed in is a discount system. So we're trying to price at, so that we're not just giving the thing away, although we give a lot of stuff away. We have a lot of resellers in our stores every day who are buying something for $3 from us and selling it for 30 or 300 sometimes. And wow. we're trying to, because we do so many different types of materials, we're trying to get a little more understanding about some of the specialties. I know that we have got an expert in records, and he just had a kind of a word of mouth boutique record sale, and I think sold like $1,000 in records the other day. But what we designed with our point of sale system that we're using, every item that we have on our sales floor has a barcode on it. And after it's been on the floor for a certain period of time, like 2 weeks, I think, then and we have 6 different colored price tags. Then if it's a blue price tag, after a couple of weeks, it goes to 25% off. Then the next week it's 50% off, and the next week it's 75%. So we kind of have this sharp curve to try to get the stuff to move and meet. If we missed on the price and the purchasing public is resistant to what we decided, it gets a lot more equitable really fast. So, but our prices start pretty low to begin with. Like most of our clothing we sell for $4 a piece. And then we do have some boutique items. Like, I mean, I think we have a Fendi bag on our eBay store right now. So.
I'm going to open it up so people can ask their own questions. I wonder, Kevin Millar in Owego, New York, would you like to ask your question directly to Diane?
Sure. The baby boom cohort is one of the largest cohorts that have crossed the threshold. When they start aging out and dying off, they're going to leave a lot of stuff behind. And is the smaller population going to be able to reuse all of that stuff in a sensible way?
That used to be my greatest worry. I used to think about, we're in that downsizing curve already, big time. And I was trying to calculate, how much longer a baby boomer is going to be downsizing, and then should we anticipate some sort of decrease? But with this past year and consumption spiking the way it has, I think that almost overpowers the baby boomer. The thing about the baby boomer stuff, and one of the criticisms we sometimes face locally, because we're so overwhelmed with material, because our community is really bought in and they're bringing us stuff. And they're like, and so I get questions, well, how much garbage are you? Maybe you need to be more selective. And I'm like, the problem is this stuff is really high quality, amazing material. And especially the stuff from baby boomers, which was made, whatever, 30, 40, 50 years ago or longer, their heirlooms as well. That stuff's, it's irreplaceable and it should be preserved. And so, I just think that we should have the right size system to manage that.
Thanks. Dale Strock, would you like to ask your question directly?
Okay, thank you. I have a cottage in Ithaca on the lake, and we have something like a 70-year-old tool shed. I wonder if you've built your deconstruction project into a service center where you can go deconstruct things locally and help community members do that and take away whatever's useful and help us throw away stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's models, and we considered trying to figure out how to deal with these 11 houses, but it depends on, there are people who pre-sell and then let people come in and buy. That's a model that exists out there. Is that what you're asking? Is
Not really. I have. It seems to me there's we have an old tool shed, 70-year-old, and we're afraid to go in it. It's so, we don't know what's in it. My husband and I are too old to bend down there and start doing the physical work.
Yeah.
So we would want to hire a company of people who know how to take it apart and see what's useful in there and take it away. But I don't know what's useful in there.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if you have a work team like that can help outside of the reuse center. Sounds like you're overwhelmed. You need more workers, not.
Yeah. What we need is, I think we need more space, and then, we need both. We've been lucky. I mean, we have not had trouble hiring people throughout all of this. People are wanting to work in our industry, which has been great, or for our organization anyway. We do tend to stay away from buildings that are, that if the roof is gone, or so that seem dangerous. We tend to focus on buildings that have remained sound. So, there are clean out services, but people who will do like a takedown of a building, it's hard to find. So I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Ted Franklin. You're muted.
I have a question, and it's about how the Ithaca Reuse Center compares to more traditional reuse facilities like the Salvation Army. We had a Salvation Army center here in Oakland that closed recently. Don't even know why. But it seems like you have a lot more community engagement. And I'm wondering whether the community engagement is related to the fact that this project was initiated as a by the county, or as a community project, or whether it's all the charismatic and imaginative leadership that it has.
Yeah, well, I mean, we definitely wanted to be community based, and I I don't think I can take credit for how engaged this community is. I do think that some of the strategies we employed, like asking questions before we open the doors, we engaged a lot of partners. We engaged some very conservative partners by saying, hey, we've got half a business plan. And that's what our business plan template talks about, is sharing a draft for feedback. So we engaged a lot of people early on, a lot of community leaders and potential stakeholders. We talked to big box stores, small businesses, the educational institutions, et cetera. So that was part of the engagement. As far as, I don't know what's happening with Salvation Army, quite honestly. In the next county over, a very popular Salvation Army also just closed its doors in the last couple of months, or 6 months. And I wonder, I'll tell you, we are struggling so much with the overwhelming volume of material coming at us, and we do not have a clothing baler. So we're throwing away the clothes that we're not able to sell, which is terrible because there are markets for them. I don't know if the markets are good. That's another whole question. But the other day, in Ithaca, our Salvation Army is still open, and I can see from my office window the donation queue. And I saw the Salvation Army box truck pulling out of our parking lot. I went and asked our donation, I'm like, what did they just bring us? And they said a whole truckload of stuff, the type of stuff we'd sell, like household items and stuff. So we actually just last week suspended, we asked the public to stop bringing us household goods and clothing because we have such an enormous backlog of it. And because we're trying to process these building materials, we had to say uncle for now. And I wonder if that's part of the Salvation Army's decision, is that what used to be a really profitable thrift business for them, if they don't have that downstream baling infrastructure, they might be like we are, overwhelmed with the price of the waste that's associated with that. And it might just not be a moneymaker anymore for them.
Yeah. So Diane, we're saving the best for last, maybe, or I've had so many questions coming to me directly, and it's probably my biggest question too, is can you talk a little bit more about how we might start such a reuse center on a smaller scale to begin with in our own communities? I know you offer the template that you're hoping to find time to update at some point, but just give us some like absolute basics, like what we would need before we could even really think about it more seriously.
Sure. So, I came out of the building materials reuse world. That's what I really want, because it's a big chunk of our nation's waste stream and it's completely underserved. There's a few building material reuse places that are very successful around the country, but there's not nearly enough. And I wanted to do deconstruction. I wanted to take apart houses, but before you do that, you need a place for this stuff to go. So you need a place to generate revenue. And one of the things that I've learned is that it doesn't need to be a standalone place. As a matter of fact, in a little strip mall or a mall, and ideally someplace with a loading dock, we do not have loading docks, and it is a huge pain. But you can start fairly small. I think Cortland Reuse started with a 5,000 square foot, and I think that's a little too small. We started in 2008 with 7,000 square feet, and we expanded into the store next door, which was another 6,000, about 2.5 years later. And we got almost enough seed money to help us do that. We actually retracted out of it for a year and back into it in 2012. But we kind of felt our way through the growth of this. So I would say, look at what your resources are. See who there might be a property owner who will give you a creative lease where they'll forgive the first 3 to 6 months, or maybe even a year, if you can give them some sort of down payment or something. You don't need, like, we really didn't pre-purchase a lot of our stuff. I mean, we got hand trucks and rolling carts donated to us over time. So, that's one of the beautiful things about this business is you can kind of work with what you have. It's so potentially big. So I do think that drafting some sort of basic business plan, and one of the things about the template that's not broken is even if you go through it, and you'll see it's a little bit catered to starting a nonprofit in New York State, and it follows New York State nonprofit law, but you can use the general concepts. And one of the things I was really happy about that the second year of this grant that helped us put this together allowed us to do is you can populate it with very few things, but you can press print and it will download a Microsoft Word formatted business plan where you can share that. I would be starting to assemble your list of community leaders, stakeholders, who's interested, and be strategic about getting some sort of draft together that you could share that does not need to be finished for feedback, and think about who you can engage. And I think the broader a community you can engage, and I would go for people who are, across the aisle too, because Republicans really get this as well. And, I really think that being broadly engaging in this will serve us all really well, because everybody gets not everybody, a lot of people get how important this is, for sure. I hope that was a little bit helpful.
Yes, it was. And we're just about at our 75-minute mark. So we will stop the recording now, and this will be the end of the formal program. But for those who'd like to stick around, that was a great thing to end on, Diane. And we have been dropping in the chat, and we will do so again, the link to Diane's site, and the templates are on there, and there's so much rich information on the website that you can draw from. And she has also invited us to communicate with her directly. I will say for her, she didn't tell me to say this, but I'm going to say, don't expect that. Obviously, she's an incredibly busy woman, so please don't expect an immediate answer, and forgive her if she doesn't get to it under the piles of other things that are being dumped on her every day. And I just thank you so much, Diane. This has been so instructive and really inspiring, because we hear so much negativity, including on our own webinars. There's just so much to be distraught, pissed off, frustrated, and grief-stricken about. And this is the kind of thing we really need to hear more of, positive solutions in our own communities, because it may sound trite, but thinking globally and acting locally really is the best thing we can do as activists. And thank you to everybody, and everybody for joining us. Please stick around if you'd like to, and we'll drop these links once again in the chat. Thank you. For those who have to leave, thanks for being here. Please check out System Change, Not Climate Change as well, and join us if you want to learn more, and look for our email about our next webinar next month.